Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the shadowy embrace of ancient forests, where the air hangs heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine needles crunching underfoot like whispered secrets. Imagine towering cedars stretching their arms toward a canopy so thick it filters sunlight into golden threads, dancing on mossy floors where ferns unfurl like nature's own bandages ready to cradle the weary. The wind sighs through the leaves, carrying faint echoes of chants long faded. And somewhere in the underbrush, a healer kneels, fingers stained green from crushing leaves that promise to knit flesh back together. It's a world where every twig holds a story of survival, every root a remedy for the raw ache of a world that bites back. But here's a cheeky little reality check. In those untamed wilds, one wrong berry could turn your adventure into a one-way ticket to the great beyond. You probably won't survive this if you go foraging without a guide. Trust me, I've binge-watched enough survival shows to know the plot twist. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're drifting off from Tokyo at 3 a.m. Cozy cabin in the Rockies? Let's make this a global lullaby. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Deep in the heart of those mist-shrouded woods, where the first light of dawn barely pierced the veil, Native American healers, those quiet guardians of the green world, began their timeless dance with the forest's hidden gifts. Picture it. A young warrior, say from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, stumbles back to camp after a skirmish with rival clans, his side gashed open by a flint-tipped arrow, the metallic tang of blood mixing with the loamy breath of the earth. No sterile hospitals here, no buzzing fluorescents or crinkling paper gowns, just the healer, an elder woman with eyes like polished river stones, who slips into the undergrowth like a shadow. She doesn't rush. Why would she, when the trees have been waiting eons to share their secrets? Her hands, calloused from years of weaving baskets and pounding roots, move with the deliberate grace of someone who knows the forest isn't just a backdrop. It's the apothecary, the surgeon, the soothing voice in the dark. She starts with the basics, because even in the wild, healing begins with what's underfoot. Willow bark, that flexible friend of fevered brows, becomes her first ally. Stripped from a slender branch by the stream, where the water gurgles like a contented infant, she chews it into a pulpy mash, the bitter sap coating her tongue like overbrewed tea on a Monday morning. Oh, the irony. Modern hipsters sip willow-infused lattes for detox, little knowing this same bark salicin compound is the granddaddy of aspirin, a mainstream historical fact that saved more headaches than any pill bottle on your nightstand. She presses the wad against the wound, murmuring words in her tongue that blend with the rustle of leaves, as if coaxing the tree's essence to seep into the skin, drawing out the fire of infection like a magnet for misery. But let's pause for a gentle chuckle. Imagine if we'd patented that back then. We'd all be billionaires from bark, and your grandma's medicine cabinet would look like a lumberyard. Healers didn't hoard, though. Knowledge flowed like sap in spring, passed from moccasined foot to foot around crackling fires, in tribes across the northeast woodlands, from the Algonquin rivers to the Iroquois longhouses. These women, and yes, it was often the women, the ones who birthed life and mended its breaks, gathered in circles under the stars. They'd trade tales alongside their tinctures. This one's for arrow pricks, one might say, holding up a sprig of goldenrod, its yellow blooms like tiny suns captured in fistfuls. And this, another counters with a wink, for when your husband's hunting stories get too tall, laughter ripples soft as the wind, because healing wasn't just herbs, it was harmony, a reminder that wounds of the body echoed those of the spirit, and both needed tending. As the sun climbs higher, filtering through the haze in lazy beams that warm the healer's back, she ventures deeper. The forest whispers back, branches parting like old friends to reveal jewelweed, that orange lanterned herb dangling from arching stems. Squeeze its pods, and out oozes a clear gel, cool as morning dew on bare skin, perfect for soothing the itch of poison ivy, or in this case, the angry red halo around the warrior's gash. It's quirky. This plant, fringed tidbits swirl around it like fireflies at dusk. Some say the Cherokee called it touch me not just for its explosive seeds, but because it touched the skins so gently, almost flirtatiously, easing inflammation with a gel that's 90% water and pure botanical charm. She slavers it on, the slickness gliding over inflamed edges, and the warrior hisses through clenched teeth, not from pain, but surprise. It's like the forest itself is kissing the hurt away, soft and insistent. Historians still argue whether these early remedies were born of pure observation or something more mystical. Like dreams sent by the spirits of the trees themselves, did the healers discover, or were they taught, in visions under the full moon? Either way, the debate adds a layer of wonder, doesn't it? Like pondering if your coffee's kick is science or sorcery on a groggy morning. Our healer doesn't dwell. She's too busy layering on the next secret. A poultice of plantain leaves, those humble broadleaf soldiers that carpet the forest floor, stubborn weeds that laugh at mowers but bow to her will. Crushed with a stone smoothed by centuries of river tumble, they release a sticky sap that draws out pus like a vacuum for villains, nature's own debrider, pulling toxins to the surface where they can be washed away in a nearby brook. The air thickens with the scent of crushed greens, sharp and verdant, mingling with the faint, earthy musk of the warrior's sweat-soaked leathers. He lies there on a bed of pine boughs, needles pricking just enough to keep him grounded, while she works. Modern aside, Wed call this wound care protocol with sterile gloves and antibiotic ointments, but here it's raw, real fingers dipping into clay pots of rendered bear fat to bind it all, the grease slick and warm, carrying the faint wild animal whiff that says, "This is life, unfiltered," and here's a sleepy sarcasm slip, "Bear fat moisturizer? Sign me up for the spa day, as long as it doesn't come with the hibernation hangover." By midday, the camp stirs. Children dart like sparrows, gathering more ferns for padding, their giggles a counterpoint to the low chants that rise like steam from a kettle. The healer tests her work, peeling back the leaf dressing to reveal skin that's already less angry, the edges knitting like threads in a loom. But wounds don't heal in a hurry. She knows that, so she brews a tea from sassafras roots, dug from the damp soil where fungi thread the earth like hidden veins. The brew steams aromatic, spicy as root beer before it was bottled and branded, sipped slowly to bolster from within. Fever breakers and blood cleansers in one crimson cup. Quirky tidbit time. Some tribes believe sassafras could make you invisible to enemies. A fringe folklore flourish that probably started when a warrior dodged a bad hangover and swore the tree spirits hid him. Who am I to judge? I've hidden from Mondays with worse. As shadows lengthen, painting the forest in strokes of amber and indigo, the warrior stirs, his breath evening out to the rhythm of distant owl calls. The healer sits back, wiping her hands on her deerskin apron, the stains a badge of battles won quietly. This is the wildwood's whisper. Not a roar of conquest, but a hush of persistence, where every scar tells of secrets shared between human and humus. And in that glide from pain to peace, the forest holds its breath, waiting for the next call, the next gash, the next gasp, ready to bandage the body's silent screams with leaves that listen. Joke tally creeping up. Ever wonder if trees gossip about us? Oh, that one's back for more. Willow Mustfay tripped over his own ego again. Gentle ribbing. Because even in healing, a smirk keeps the spirits light. The mist rolls in thicker now, cloaking the canopy in silver. And as the first stars prick the twilight, the healer's work fades into the night's embrace, a prelude to deeper dives into bark-bound balms and berry-born brews that await just beyond the tree line. The mist lingers like a half-remembered dream, curling around the healer's ankles as she rises from her vigil, the warrior's breaths now sinking with the slow sway of birch branches overhead. But dawn doesn't dawdle in these woods. It creeps in on paws of pink light, nudging the camp awake with birdsong that trills like tiny bells in the chill air. Our elder doesn't head straight for her reed-woven hut. No, there's more unearthing to do, more roots to coax from the reluctant soil, because a single night's poultice is just the opening act in this slow symphony of mending. She shoulders a woven tump-line basket, the fibres rough against her sun-browned skin, and slips toward the river's edge, where the real unsung heroes wait. Barks that bite back at infection, and berries plump with defiant juices, forged in the fires of fang and flint, long before steel ever whispered threats. Follow her there if you will, your footsteps muffled on the needle-strewn path, the air sharpening with the crisp bite of impending frost. The river murmurs secrets to the banks, a silver ribbon threading through stands of ancient oaks and maples, their trunks etched with the patient scars of lightning and lean winters. Flint wounds those jagged kisses from arrowheads, or spear points in raids between the Lenape and their neighbours. Demand more than a hasty leaf slap. They fester like grudges, if not met with resilience rooted deep. And fangs? Oh, the wild world's own daggers, from bear claws in berry disputes or wolf packs testing the fringes of a hunt gone sideways. Tribes from the Great Lakes to the Appalachians learned early. The forest doesn't just shelter. It arms you with quiet warriors disguised as humble scraps of bark and berry clusters. Heroes so unassuming you'd overlook them in a grocery aisle today. She kneels first by a sturdy white oak, its bark ridged like the knuckles of an old storyteller, flaking in earthy curls that smell of damp cellars and forgotten attics. With a flint knife ironic that, given the wounds it mimics, she scores a shallow line, peeling back just enough to reveal the inner cambium layer, pale and fibrous as pulled pork fresh off the spit. This is slippery elm, not the oak itself, but its kin, the one that lines the understory like a shy attendant waiting for its cue. Scraped into a palm, turns to mucilage when wet, a slick, gelid shield that coats the throat, or, in this case, the raw trench of a gash from a bobcat swipe. Mainstream historical fact here. The Ojibwe and other Anishinaabe peoples documented this in birch bark scrolls as far back as the 1700s, using it not just for wounds but as a survival gum during famines, a sticky sustenance that kept warriors marching when provisions played hide and seek. Dipping it into a hollowed gourd of stream water, she works it into a paste, the transformation almost magical, from dry shavings to a soothing sludge that clings like a lover's promise, drawing out the heat from inflamed flesh. Imagine slathering it on a cool, viscous embrace that numbs the throb without the chemical haze of today's numbing gels. Modern aside, Wed bottle this as organic wound whisperer and charge $20 a jar, complete with essential oil spritzes and a side of guilt-free capitalism. But here, it's free as the wind, shared in the healer's low hum of approval as she packs it into the warrior's dressing, layering over the jewel weed from last eve. The scent rises soft and nutty, mingling with the river's mineral tang, a perfume that's equal parts comfort and wild edge. Not all heroes are bark-bound, though. Berries beckon from the brambles, thorny guardians that snag at her skirts like playful imps. Blackberry bushes, those tangled anarchists of the forest edge, yield clusters dark as midnight secrets, their skins taut and jeweled with dew. Picked with careful twists, thumbs stained purple as a poet's ink, she crushes them in a mortar of hollowed stone, the juice bursting forth in tart rivulets that sting the tongue like a first sip of autumn's bite. These aren't for snacking when flesh is torn by flint. They're alchemized into astringent washes, the tannins tightening skin like a corset for the soul, staunching blood from gashes that weep like open letters. Quirky tidbit. Fringe lore from the Creek tribes whispers that blackberries weren't just healers, but blood brothers, believed to carry the essence of the earth's own veins, turning wounds into temporary tattoos of resilience. Some elders even painted them on scars for luck, a berry-born badge against future fangs. She pours the mash into a bark cup, steeping it with hot stones dropped from the fire pit, sizzle and steam rising like a sigh, the air thickening with fruity sharpness that masks the underlying copper of healing blood. Applied as a rinse, it bites back at the microbes lurking in a wolf-bitten thigh. The acidity, a gentle scourge that modern labs would applaud. Historians still argue whether these berry balms were refined through deliberate breeding of wild strains or stumbled upon in the chaos of post-hunt triage. Were the bushes selectively thinned for sweeter, stronger yields, or did survival just favour the sharpest thorns? The debate simmers like that very steep, unanswered but enriching the tale, much like wondering if your favourite coffee blend owes more to luck or legacy. Laughter bubbles up from the camp behind her, faint as distant thunder, children mimicking the healer's berry-picking crouch, their mock-serious faces smeared with rogue juices. "Look, I'm a fang fighter," one squeals, brandishing a twig like a sword, while another retorts, "Your berries are squished flatter than Uncle's tall tales." Jokes like fireflies, lighting the morning without scorching. The healer smiles, a crinkle at her eyes, because teaching isn't lectures, it's play wrapped in purpose. She gathers more, service berries from the low shrubs, blue-grey orbs that dangle like smoky pearls, milder in temper, but mighty in mending. Crushed and mixed with the blackberry slurry, they add a demulcent softness, a yin to the yang of astringency, coating the wound's depths to foster that slow, stubborn knit of tissue. By the time the sun hangs midway, gilding the leaves in lazy gold, her basket brims a mosaic of shredded barks in tawny curls and berry pulps, staining the weave like abstract art. Back at the warrior's side, she unwraps the night's work, the air humming with the low buzz of horseflies, kept at bay by the sharp scents. The gash, once a ragged invitation to fever, now gleams less angrily, the edges puckering under the elm's embrace. She dabs the berry wash with a pad of clean moss. Remember that velvet touch we glimpsed in the mist? It soaks up the excess like a faithful sponge, absorbent and antimicrobial, a forest footnote to the root's resilience. They're fat again, rendered till it gleams like liquid amber. Seals the deal, its warmth seeping in as she massages gently, fingers tracing the wound's map with the reverence of a cartographer charting stars. The warrior murmurs thanks in the old tongue, voice rough as river gravel, and she waves it off with a sleepy sarcasm. Save your breath for the hunt, not flattery berries don't fish compliments. Another chuckle ripples through her, soft as the rustle of serviceberry leaves in the breeze. Joining the tally of 3 for this stretch, the kids' berry brigade, the uncle's tales, and now this. Sensory layers deepen the pulpy squelch under her thumbs, the faint feral whiff of fat meeting fruit, the warrior's skin warming from clammy to alive. Modern minds might scoff at the simplicity, but here's the gentle poke. Wed. Trade our high-tech bandages for this. If we remembered roots run deeper than Wi-Fi signals, resilience, not in apps but in the earth's quiet hoard. As afternoon shadows stretch like lazy cats across the clearing, the healer steps back, surveying her handiwork. The forest watches, unblinking, its barks and berries the true sentinels against the wilds. Whims, fangs, fury, or flint's flash. These unsung allies, unearthed with calloused hands and patient hearts, weave the first threads of tomorrow's tales, pulling us onward to the pouches where such secrets are stowed, waiting for the moon to call them forth once more. Shadows stretch like lazy cats across the clearing. But the healer's work doesn't fold with the fading light. It unfurls under the moon's pale gaze, where the forest trades its daytime chatter for nocturnal murmurs. The warrior sleeps now, his chest rising and falling in the measured cadence of mending dreams, the berry-tinged dressing a faint purple smudge on his side like a bruise from a forgotten brawl. She gathers her tools, not steel scalpels or glass vials, but the shaman's satchel, that weathered hide pouch slung low on her hip, stitched with sinew and adorned with quills that rattle softly, like wind chimes in a breeze too gentle to wake the dead. Crafted in the hush of moonlit canopies, where silver light sifts through pine needles like spilled mercury, This isn't just a bag. It's a battlefield balm in portable form, brimming with pine pitches' sticky resolve and willow's whispered salves, secrets distilled from the day's unearthing into midnight's quiet alchemy. Slip closer. Feel the cool kiss of night air on your skin, scented with the resinous tang of evergreens standing sentinel, their branches whispering conspiracies to the stars. The satchel sways as she moves, a rhythmic hush-hush against her thigh, content shifting like old friends settling in for a story. She built it seasons ago, under a canopy so dense the moon played peekaboo, threading porcupine quills through deer hide with bone needles sharpened on river stones, each stitch a prayer, each quill a talisman against the unseen. Inside, compartments woven from nettle cord hold the hoard, vials of birch tar for sealing gashes, twists of dried willow bark coiled like sleeping serpents, and pouches of pine pitch, that amber glue harvested from wounded trees, mirroring the very hurts it heals. Mainstream historical fact: the Lakota and Dakota healers of the plains carried similar medicine bundles into the 1800s, documented in trader journals as mystery packs that turned the tide in skirmishes against smallpox-scarred foes. Their pitch poultices, a sticky bulwark against the white man's unseen arrows. She settles by the fire's embers, now banked to a ruddy glow that paints her face in flickering warmth, the crackle a soft underscore to the owl's distant hoot. Unlacing the drawstring frayed from countless untyings, smelling of earth and faint smoke, she dips in for the pine pitch first, that viscous heart of the conifer world. Collected in spring when sap runs sweet and slow, it's boiled down in clay pots over open flames until it darkens to a tacky gold flexible as fate itself. With a wooden spatula carved from elder branch, remember those juicy elixirs we teased at the river's edge? She scoops a dollop, warming it between palms till it softens, the scent blooming sharp and citrusy, like Christmas trees plotting a summer rebellion. Smeared over the warrior's flint-flayed edges, it forms a waterproof seal, trapping heat and herbs beneath, while warding off the night's damp chill that could turn a clean-cut septic. Modern aside, we'd call this bioadhesive dressing, slap her FDA stamp on it, and sell it in neon packaging. Meanwhile, she's been DIYing it for generations, no assembly required. The willow whispers come next. Those flexible wands stripped bare and sun-bleached in the pouch, bundled with hawkweed for extra bite against bruises from a rival's club. She selects a twist, snapping it with a dry crack that echoes like a knuckle pop in the quiet, then shreds it into flakes that flutter down like autumn's confetti, steeped in a tin cup traded from French voyageurs. A rare concession to the outside worlds, gleam the infusion brews golden, steaming with the faint almondy edge of its inner secrets. Sipped or swabbed, it dulls the ache, salicin weaving through veins like a lullaby for the inflamed. Quirky tidbit: fringe tales from the Abenaki whisper that willow branches weren't just medicinal but mischievous. Their flexibility, a gift from trickster spirits who bent them to whip away evil humours. Some healers even flicked them like switches during rituals, claiming the snaps scared off fever demons faster than a stern glance at a dawdling child. Historians still argue whether these satchels evolved as shamanic heirlooms passed matrilineally with incantations, or pragmatic packs born of nomadic necessity, pieced together on the fly during migrations that chased buffalo shadows across the plains. The debate hangs like mist in the canopy, enriching the enigma without resolving it, much like pondering if your midnight snack is genius or just gravity's pull. She doesn't fret over origins. Practicality is her prayer. Now the pouch yields more, a twist of sweet gum bark rasped to powder for its styptic sting, sprinkled into the pitch to thicken it against oozing spear punctures. The air grows heady, a cocktail of resin and root that clings to your nostrils, evoking cellars stocked for siege. She works by feel in the low light, fingers dancing over the warrior's form, layering the warmed pitch like caulk on a leaky hull, then draping willow-soaked moss. Ah, that mossy miracle from the mist, absorbent as a secret keeper to cushion the seal. From the pouch depths emerges a smaller vessel, a quail's eggshell pierced and strung on thong, filled with goldenrod oil infused under summer solstice sun, tipped onto a cloth of woven milkweed fibre, soft as a sigh. Tough as resolve, it anoints the dressing's edges, the oil's yellow hue glowing like liquid dawn. This combats the low-grade throb from fang-frayed limbs, its anti-inflammatory kiss a counterpoint to the pitcher's grip. Sensory immersion. The oil's herbal sharpness cuts through the pitcher's piney cloak, mingling with the fire's smoky veil and the warrior's deepening snores, a nocturnal orchestra tuned to healing's hum. Gentle sarcasm slips in. Imagine Amazon Prime for this. Shaman's Satchel Starter Kit arrives in 2 moons, includes 1 confused drone pilot, Lauter's Light Touch, the first of our trio, easing the weight of the night's labours. Deeper still, the satchel guards rarities. A vial of skunk cabbage root, that foul fighter for stubborn infections. Its odour, a bold declaration, even in the moon's demure glow, mashed with bare-fat callback to that greasy guardian from the root's resilience. It forms a base for balms that tackle the deep-seated rot from untreated arrow barbs. She applies sparingly, the stench a brief assault softened by the willow's veil, but effective as a porcupine's quill's nature's way of saying, "Back off, bugaboos." Around the fire's edge, apprentices gather, shadows with wide eyes, their whispers a rustle of curiosity. "Pass the pitch," she instructs one. A girl no taller than a foxglove stalk, who fumbles the spatula with a giggle that bubbles like brook water. Easy now too much, and hell stick to his mat like a bad bet. Second joke lands soft, the girl's cheeks flushing in the ember light, while the third waits in the wings. The warrior stirs, mumbling about dreams of endless hunts, and the healer quips to the stars. If only wounds healed as fast as his appetite. Moonlight shifts, tracing silver paths across the pouch quills, each one a story etched in barb and barbule, harvested ethically, of course, from malts left like forest offerings. She repacks with ritual care, folding barks into leaf liners to keep them dry, sealing oils with wax plugs from bee balm hives. This satchel isn't mere storage. It's a mobile medicine wheel, turning the chaos of battlefield balms into ordered grace, where pine's tenacity meets willow's, yield in a dance as old as the first scar. The warrior's wound, now encased in this crafted cocoon, breathes easier. The pitchers seal a promise against the dawn's dews. Modern minds might marvel at the microbiology pitchers terpenes as natural antibiotics. But here, it's spirit and sap entwined, a pouch of power that hums with the forest's pulse. As the embers sigh their last, painting the canopy in fading flickers, the healer shoulders her satchel once more, its weight a comforting anchor in the night's flow. The moon watches, approving, as she glides toward the elderberry thickets, where juicy secrets simmer in the dark, ready to soothe fevers from wounds that whisper of battles yet to bloom in the telling. The moon watches, approving, as she glides toward the elderberry thickets, where juicy secrets simmer in the dark, ready to soothe fevers from wounds that whisper of battles yet to bloom in the telling. Branches part like courteous hosts, their leaves a lacework of silver-edged green, rustling with the promise of plump clusters hidden in the gloom. Elderberry sambucus, the elder's own tree, or so the old tongues named it, stands at the forest's fringe, a shrubby sentinel with wood as dark as secrets, and berries that dangle like forbidden jewels, ripening from green tartness to inky purple under summer's lingering gaze. But it's not the fruit alone that calls her now. It's the fever's flush, creeping up the warrior's neck like dawn's unwelcome blush, turning his skin to a fevered canvas that demands more than pitches, seal, or bark's bite. These thickets, alive with the hum of night insects and the faint, fermented whiff of overripe drupes, hold elixirs that blend the juicy with the arcane, folklore woven into recipes half-forgotten, like half-sung lullabies in the wind. She moves with the night's easy rhythm, moccasins whispering over dew-slick moss, the satchel's quills tinkling a soft counterpoint to the distant lap of the river. The air here thickens, sweet sour as a jar of jam left too long in the sun, mingling with the earthy undertone of decaying leaves that carpet the ground like a quilt of quiet endings. Elderberries aren't plucked lightly. They're a conversation with the plant, a respectful tug that yields stems bending without breaking, clusters heavy in her palm, their skins taut and cool, bursting with juice that stains fingers like war paint from a gentler campaign. Back by the embers, now just a whisper of warmth, coals glowing like sleepy eyes, she sets to work. The moon her only witness, casting long shadows that dance across her hands as she strips the berries from their umbels, tiny pops echoing like rain on a drum. Into a clay bowl they tumble, a cascade of midnight orbs rolling with the weight of their watery wealth. Each one, a minuscule balloon of antiviral virtue. She crushes them with a pestle of smoothed granite, slow, deliberate circles that release the juice in sluggish rivulets, the scent blooming musky and floral, like grapes kissed by autumn's edge. This isn't idle mashing. It's extraction, the pulp's essence drawn forth to brew an elixir for the fever that festers from wounds left too long in the damp, those flint slashes that invite heat like uninvited guests to a feast. Mainstream historical fact. The Cherokee and other southeastern tribes brewed elderberry cordials as early as the 1500s, recorded by Spanish chroniclers as fever fighters that quelled outbreaks during humid summers, their syrups a sticky shield against the infections that shadowed every skirmish or hunt gone awry. Water from the river fetched earlier in a birch bark flask, cool and clear as a forgotten spring joins the mash, heated gently over the coals with stones that hiss like contented snakes. The mixture simmers, bubbles rising, lazy and iridescent, the steam carrying a tang that's equal parts candy and cough syrup, wrapping around her like a shawl woven from whispers. She strains it through a sieve of woven grass, the pulp catching like reluctant confessions, leaving a deep violet liquor that gleams in the firelight. A pinch of ginger root dug from the pouch, its knobby warmth a callback to those roots of resilience adds bite, and a twist of lemon balm from the satchels. Herb nook tempers the sweetness, turning the brew into a balanced potion. Soothing on the tongue, fierce in the veins. Sipped from a gourd ladle, it slides down warm as a hug. Elderberry's flavonoids flushing out the fever's fire, coaxing sweat that breaks like a storm's release. Folklore folds into the folds here, tales traded around such fires like currency more precious than wampum. Elder wasn't just a bush. It was a bridge to the unseen. Its hollow stems, flutes for spirit songs. Its berries, blood of the earth mother herself. Fringe tidbit. Some Pacific Northwest quack-quack-quack stories fringe the edges with whispers that elderberries held the dreams of the dead. Their elixirs not merely medicinal, but mnemonic. Drink deep, and you dream the ancestors' cures, waking with recipes whispered in sleep, a nocturnal download from the great beyond. She stirs the pot with a wooden spoon carved from the trees. Own branch symbiosis in every swirl, murmuring a chant that's half melody, half murmur. Words that invoke the flowers, white umbels, those springtime snowdrifts that precede the fruit, symbols of purity before the passion of the berries bloom. Historians still argue whether these elderberry elixirs were standardized recipes passed through guild-like circles of healers or improvised symphonies tuned to the seasons. Whims did the women of the Choctaw codify measurements in moon phases, or was it all intuition sharpened by trial and the occasional fevered hallucination? The question lingers like steam from the pot, unanswered but alluring, much like debating if your go-to tea blend is habit or hidden genius. She ladles a portion into a cup of horn, steam curling like question marks, and carries it to the warrior's side. His brow beads with the first beads of breaking fever, skin slick under her touch as she tilts the elixir to his lips, slow sips that part dry and return moist, the juice's richness coating his throat like velvet over gravel. Sensory tide. The liquid's warmth seeps in, fruity depth undercut by ginger's zing, mingling with the night's cool breath and the faint yeasty echo of the berry's wild yeast. Alive even in the brew. From the shadows, the apprentices edge closer, drawn by the scent like moths to a lantern, eyes wide, noses twitching. The youngest, that foxglove stalk girl from the satchel's stitching, perches on a log, legs swinging like pendulums. "Does it taste like the stories, grandmother?" she asks, voice a thread in the tapestry. The healer pauses, cut midway, and with a sleepy wink. "Sweeter than your father's fishing yarns, but twice as slippery, watch, or it'll slide right past the fever and into dreams." First joke lands light as a leaf, drawing a ripple of giggles that chase the chill. She demonstrates the straining again, letting them press the sieve. Purple drips spotting their tunics like badges of initiation. Modern aside, we'd Instagram this as number ancestral apothecary. Filters on the steam for that ethereal vibe. But here it's unpolished poetry, hand-stained, hearts open, no likes required. The brew isn't solo. It pairs with forgotten recipes pulled from memory's larder. A secondary syrup simmers on a flat stone elderflowers gathered at dawn's first blush, their cream petals bruised with honey from wild hives, a demulcent drizzle for throats raw from fever's rasp. Drizzled over the warrior's chest, it soothes the cough that rattles from deep wounds, the flower's mucilage a silken scarf against inflammation. The air layers scents. Berries, musk, flowers, honeyed hush, ginger's spicy spark, a nocturnal perfume that lulls even the fireflies into slower orbits. Second jest slips in as the girl sneezes from the steam. "Bless you and the berries. Without them, we'd all be sniffling symphonies." Laughter softens the edges. The third brewing with the pot. The warrior swallows, eyes fluttering open to mutter. Tastes like victory, or yesterday's stew, earning a chorus of chuckles that blend with the cricket's chorus. By the time the moon arcs toward midnight's throne, the elixirs work, whispers through him fever's flush, fading to a healthy glow, breaths deepening to the forest's own sigh. She banks the coals higher, adding a log that snaps like applause, and settles with her charges, passing the gourd in turns for sips that ward off the night's minor ills. These juicy secrets, elderberry's echoes, aren't just quenchers of fire. They're bridges from wound to wholeness, folklore's fruit fermented into resilience. The thickets outside rustle approval, berries still heavy on the bough, promising more brews for mornings yet unmarred. Modern sarcasm nudges. If only our energy drinks packed this punch caffeine with a side of spirits, minus the crash and the cult following. As the first hints of false dawn tint the east, pale as skimmed milk, the healer caps the remaining elixir in a stoppered gourd sealed with beeswax from the balm's hives, tucking it into the satchel for the morrow's needs. The warrior sleeps sound now, fever fled like a rooted foe, leaving space for the next trial, those gritty experiments where thorn's edge meets tincture's trial. Yarrows sting a skeptical sentinel against hasty cuts that beg for bold beginnings. Hasty cuts that beg for bold beginnings draw her from the elderberry's lingering steam. The gourd still warm in her hand as she traces the warrior's form one last time, fingers lingering on the dressing, where pitch and berry have forged their fragile peace. Dawn's first blush creeps in now. Not the bold gold of midday, but a hesitant rose that tiptoes across the treetops, painting the leaves in strokes of soft promise. The camp stirs lazily smoke from rekindled fires curling upward like question marks. The sizzle of venison scraps on hot stones mingling with the low chatter of voices shaking off sleep's cobwebs. But healing doesn't pause for breakfast. Hungers for haste, especially when a blade slip or a thorn's betrayal leaves a warrior's hand or forearm etched with a sudden slash, the blood welling quick and bright, demanding decisions in the dirt rather than deliberations by firelight. These are the gritty experiments, trial by tribe moments where the forest's offerings meet the sharp edge of skepticism, and Yarrow's sting becomes both judge and jury, for cuts that can't afford to wait. She rises with the light, brushing dew from her skirts. The satchels wait a familiar tug as she veers toward the meadow's edge, where the trees give way to wildflower riots, a riotous quilt of greens and golds stitched by the wind's whim. Yarrow stands tall here, Achillea millefolium, its feathery fronds like ferny fingers waving in the breeze, clusters of white blooms nodding like conspirators at dawn's edge. The air sharpens with its scent bitter as oversteeped tea, herbaceous and hay-like, cutting through the meadows, sweeter grass notes like a polite but insistent interruption. Not every cut calls for the big guns of pitch or elder brew. Hasty ones, those from whittling arrows or brushing too close to bramble snares, need something swift, something that bites back without brewing time. She plucks a handful, stems snapping with a crisp tisk that echoes the cut's own urgency, and chews the leaves right there, the astringent tang flooding her mouth like a dare puckering, persistent, the kind of flavor that makes you wonder if the plant knows its medicine and resents the role. Back at the fire's fringe, where a young hunter apprentice to our warrior, his arm now sporting a fresh gash from a misaimed hatchet, winces under a deerskin wrap, she spits the masticated green into her palm, a verdant wad that gleams wet in the rising sun. Pressed to the cut, it stings like nettle's revenge, the warrior's kin hissing through teeth clenched like walnut shells. But she holds firm, eyes meeting his with that elder's calm that says, trust the thorn that pricks to pull the poison. Yarrow's Achillean compounds. Nature's own styptic squad clamp down on the bleed, clotting faster than a rumour in a longhouse, while its anti-inflammatory edge dulls the throb to a dull murmur. Mainstream historical fact. The Plains Cree and Blackfoot tribes employed yarrow compresses during buffalo hunts in the 1700s, as noted in explorer accounts, staunching gashes from horn gouges or knife slips that could fell a rider mid-chase, turning potential cripples into continued contributors to the communal pot. Skepticism simmers here, though not from the wounded, who learn quick to lean into the burn, but from the circle of onlookers, elders and youths alike, clustering like crows to a corn spill. Stings worse than the cut itself, grumbles an uncle, arms crossed over his chest, furred with grey, his own scars a roadmap of less adventurous nicks. She counters with a half-smile, the wad still firm under her thumb, the air now laced with yarrows, green bite mingling with the fire's smoky char. These trials aren't tidy lab coats and clipboards, they're tribe-tested tussles, where one healer's hunch meets the group's raised brows, and success is measured in scabs that form by sundown rather than peer-reviewed papers. Modern aside, Wed-run double-blind studies on this, volunteers flinching under fluorescent lights. But here it's raw chewed on the spot, applied with spit and spite, efficacy etched in the flex of a mended fist gripping a bowstring anew. The experiments deepen as the sun climbs, warmth soaking into the meadow like honey into bread. She shifts to tinctures now, those liquid legacies born of moon-soaked macerations, where Yarrow's sisters join the fray. Self-heal's purple spikes, plucked from damp hollows, and comfrey's broad leaves, velvety as a cat's ear, gathered from streamside shade. These hasty cuts demand versatility. A slash across knuckles from flint napping might clot with Yarrow's grit but knit with Comfrey's allantoin. That cellular coaxer that speeds the knit like a seamstress on deadline. She pulls a small clay flask from the satchel. Remember those quill-rattling depths? Filled with a tincture steeped in corn spirits traded from southern kin, the liquid, amber and sharp, smelling of earth distilled to essence. Dipped on a cloth of mullein leaf, soft and woolly as a forgotten scarf, it swabbed along the gash's length. The alcohols fire a brief inferno that carries the herbs deep, skepticism yielding to the sigh of relief as the burn fades to balm. Quirky tidbit fringes in. Some Shawnee lore paints Yarrow not as healer but as warrior's whisperer, its feathery leaves said to be woven from the breath of Achilles himself, borrowed from old Greek yarns, but twisted tribal, where chewing it granted visions of the cut's true path, a fringe flourish that turned trials into trances, healers pausing mid-application to mutter prophecies like, "It'll scar crooked, but strong as your temper." She demonstrates for the doubting uncle, letting a drop of tincture bead on her own calloused thumb, the sting a spark that makes her wince theatrically, drawing a reluctant chuckle from the circle. "See? Even I dance with it, but dance poorly, and the cut leads." First joke floats light, the uncle's bark of laughter cracking the morning's quiet, while the apprentice flexes his arm, marvelling at the quick-set clot, colours shifting from angry red to thoughtful pink under the meadow's gaze. Historians still argue whether these trial-by-tribe methods spurred innovations through rivalry, clans tweaking recipes in secret to outshine neighbours, or fostered unity via shared skepticism, gatherings where failed poultices became cautionary campfires. The debate unfurls like yarrow's own bracts, layered and lingering, much like wondering if your spice rack's chaos is culinary genius or just optimistic hoarding. She presses on undeterred, mixing a fresh batch on a flat stone. Yarrow leaves bruised with self-heal flowers, the purple petals releasing a minty zing that tempers the bitterness, pounded with a pestle till it yields a paste green as envy. Applied to the apprentices, cut now a hasty heir to the warrior's woes. It draws a collective intake of breath, the sting met with a unified wince that bonds them closer than any oath, sensory swell. The paste's cool slide against hot skin, the meadow's pollen dusting the air like gold dust, the faint coppery echo of blood, now subdued to a whisper. The circle tightens, stories spilling like overflow from a full cup. The uncle recounting a trial gone awry, a tincture too strong that blistered more than it bound, earning nods and knowing hums. "Skepticism's our best route," she interjects, wiping residue from her hands on grass blades that bend forgivingly. "Without it, we'd brew blind and bleed longer." Second Jess slips in soft, the group leaning in as she layers the paste with a bandage of inner bark strips, flexible and breathable, tied with nettle twine that itches just enough to remind of resilience. Modern sarcasm whispers, "Imagine Yelp reviews for this. 5 stars for the sting, 1 for the weight. Would clot." Again, laughter ripples again. The third tallying as the apprentice quips back, "Better than your last hunt's hare that hopped away whole," pointing to the uncle's empty-handed return, the jibe landing like a feather in the breeze. By noon, the sun, a high dome, baking the meadow into a haze of heat waves. The cut's trial teeters toward triumph, the edges sealing, the apprentice's grip testing strong on a borrowed knife, skepticism schooled to respect. She gathers the remnants, yarrow sprigs tucked into the satchel for the next hasty happenstance, the flask stoppered against evaporation's theft. These thorn and tincture tussles aren't glory plays. They're the forest's gritty grace notes, where sting meets doubt in a duet that sharpens both, turning cuts from curses to chapters. The meadow hums approval, blooms bobbing in the wind, as the healer turns her gaze to the thicker woods, where sacred smokes wait to weave their invisible shields over seeping sores, vapors rising like veils between pain and peace. The meadow hums approval, blooms bobbing in the wind, as the healer turns her gaze to the thicker woods, where sacred smokes wait to weave their invisible shields over seeping sores, vapors rising like veils between pain and peace. Afternoon's gold deepens to amber now, slanting through the canopy in lazy shafts that dust the forest floor with motes dancing like fireflies at rest. The air shifts, carrying the faint, acrid promise of embers rekindled, drawing her deeper where the understory thickens with sagebrush sentinels and cedars' solemn spires, their needles a soft carpet underfoot that muffles steps to whispers. Seeping sores those stubborn traitors from deeper wounds, where pitches seal cracks under sweats, siege or yarrow's sting fades to a slow ooze, demand more than paste or poultice. They crave the intangible touch, vapors that curl like incantations, blending the burn of smouldering leaves with the hush of invoked spirits, science's subtle antimicrobials riding shotgun on faith's fumes. She pauses at the threshold, where meadow meets mossy gloom, the satchel, our old quill-rattled companion, swaying with the rhythm of her stride, its depths now murmuring for release. The warrior's gash, that flint-forged furrow from nights ago, has held through berry and bark, but now a faint seep stains the dressing, a sly reminder that healing's path wins, not straightens. His apprentice, too, flexes his hasty cut with growing ease, yet both lie in the long house's shade, breaths shallow against the afternoon's humid hush, the air inside thick with the tang of unwashed linens and lingering tincture ghosts. She gathers bundles from the pouch, sage, its grey-green leaves crinkled like parchment from elders' tales, and cedar tips, feathery fronds clipped fresh from low boughs, their scent a clean, lemony pierce that cuts the stagnation like a window cracked to winter. These aren't mere kindling, their signal fires for the unseen, smouldered to summon shields that drape over sores like invisible cloaks, warding the wet with wisps of purifying prayer. Kneeling by the central hearth, stones blackened from seasons of stories. The pit, a shallow cradle for coals that glow like buried suns. She arranges the greens in a clay bowl etched with spiral motifs, spirals that echo the smoke's own curl. A flint striker sparks life from tinder of shredded birch bark callback to those resilient roots we unearthed by the river. Flames licking, tentative at first, then hungry, the heat blooming soft against her cheeks. She adds the sage first, crushing a handful between palms till the oils release in a sharp, camphorous burst. Like sagebrush after rain plotting its dry comeback, tucked into the coals, it catches slow, stems charring to a steady smoulder, smoke uncoiling in lazy tendrils that fill the space with a scent both cleansing and ceremonial herbal bite, laced with earth's quiet char, wrapping the longhouse like a shawl against the chill of unseen ills. Mainstream historical fact. The Navajo and Hopi peoples of the Southwest used cedar and sage smudges in healing rites as early as the 1600s, chronicled by missionary accounts as smoke cures that quelled post-raid infections, their thymol-rich vapors acting as natural antiseptics. To staunch the seep from arrow-punctured limbs, the vapors weave their way, tendrils questing like fingers over the warrior's form, drawn by her murmured breath that guides them. Inhale deep, exhale the old, a rhythm older than the oaks outside. She wafts the smoke with an eagle feather, its veins broad and barred in browns and whites, fanned gently to direct the flow over the seeping sore, the dressing peeled back just enough to bare the raw edge, where ooze beads like reluctant tears. The smoke clings, a hazy veil that softens the air's edge, sage's salvianolic acid seeping into the skin's protest, easing inflammation while cedar's antifungal whisper chases the damp's dark dwellers. Sensory drift. The smoke's warmth ghosts across your face, eyes watering just a touch from the sting. But it's a benevolent burn, like staring too long at a sunset that promises tomorrow. Modern aside, wed, aerosolize this into herbal healing mist, sprays spritzed in yoga studios for that detox vibe. But here, it's unboxed ritual, no fine print on the label. Spirits join the science uninvited, invoked in the low chant that rises with the smoke words in the old cadence. Syllables rolling like river stones, calling on the four directions to knit the veil tighter. The longhouse dims under the haze, light fracturing into rainbows on the thatch, the air humming with a subtle shift, as if the walls themselves lean in to listen. Quirky tidbit. Fringe whispers from the micmac of the Atlantic shores. Fringe the smoke with sparkle cedar vapors. Weren't just shields, but story carriers believed to ferry the sore's pain to the stars, where it dissolved into constellations that mapped future hunts, some healers even reading the curls like tea leaves to predict if the wound would scar lucky or lean. She traces the feather's path, smoke pooling in the wounds, hollow like liquid light, the seep slowing to a reluctant trickle, the skin's angry flush yielding to a calmer rose. Historians still argue whether these sacred smokes were primarily pragmatic early empiricists, harnessing volatile oils against bacteria, or profoundly spiritual, with vapors as literal portals for ancestral advice on the sore's stubborn siege. The debate swirls like the smoke itself, unresolved and enriching, much like pondering if your essential oil diffuser is therapy or just fancy humidity. The apprentice stirs now, his hasty cuts ooze kissed by the same veil, eyes cracking open to the haze's embrace, coughing a laugh that's half wheeze, half wonder. "Smells like grandmother's warnings," he mutters, voice thick as the air, and she replies with a sleepy tilt. "Better than your sweat, at least this one cleans as it chides." First joke drifts light, drawing a shared chuckle that parts the vapors like a breeze through cobwebs. The longhouse warming not just from the coals but from the ease rippling through. She layers in more. A braid of sweetgrass, tucked into the bowl's edge, is vanilla-sweet smoke, a counterpoint to sage's sharpness, braided tight as a promise against relapse. The blend rises richer now. A trinity of scents: cedar's citrus snap, sage's sagebrush soul, sweetgrass sugary hush curling over both men, the vapors weaving tighter, invisible threads that bind soul to spirit in a cocoon of calm. The feather fan steady, her arm a pendulum in the dim, the chant softening to a hum that syncs with the distant call of a loon across the water. Nature's own underscore, reminding that shields aren't forged in isolation. Modern sarcasm slips in. Imagine if Wed bottled this as smudge stick subscription monthly deliveries of enlightenment, with bonus affirmations on the box. Who'd subscribe? The insomniacs or the influencers? From the doorway, the circle reforms elders drawn by the smoke signal, like moths to a gentler flame, settling on reed mats with pipes of their own. Puffing kinnikinnick, that bearberry blend to join the rite. Stories unfurl in the haze. One recounts a seep turned septic under a new moon, saved only by a sage storm conjured in desperation. Another teases the warrior's old raid, where smoke saved his hide from a spear's sly twist. The apprentice, emboldened, pipes up, "If smoke's a shield, does it block bad dreams too?" She pauses the fan, smoke eddying lazy, and quips back, "Only if you dream of chores, nightmares of dishes done, vanish faster than your arrows." Second, jest lands soft. The group's laughter, a low wave that carries the vapors deeper, while the third brews in the uncle's rumble. "My shield's the bottle, cedar in my cup, sage in my step, keeps the seep away till morning regrets it." By twilight's indigo creep, the longhouse glows from within, smoke thinning to wisps that slip through the vent hole like released secrets. The sores now sealed in quiet repose, no more seep, just the slow-knit underdressings refreshed with a final sage leaf, tucked like a talisman. The warrior sleeps deeper, breaths even as the embers fade, the apprentice flexing fingers that forget the cut's complaint. These sacred signals aren't spectacle, they're subtle sorcery, smouldering greens invoking shields that guard the seeping. With equal parts ether and essence, spirits and science in harmonious haze. The forest outside sighs in sync, cedars rustling their approval, as the healer banks the coals one last time. The bowl set aside for the morrows needs mossy miracles, waiting just beyond the smoke's settling veil, velvet touches ready to press into service for the spear-pierced and the steadfast. The forest outside sighs in sync, cedars rustling their approval, as the healer banks the coals one last time. The bowl set aside for the morrows needs mossy miracles waiting just beyond the smoke's settling veil, velvet touches ready to press into service for the spear-pierced and the steadfast. Twilight deepens to that bruised purple hour, where the canopy's edges blur into the sky's soft surrender, and the air cools to a caress that carries the faint, loamy perfume of damp undergrowth awakening under the stars. She steps out from the longhouse's shadowed moor, the satchel ever the faithful shadow, bumping gently against her hip. Quills hushed now in the night's repose, but rest is for the healed. Her path veers to the bog's fringe, that secretive swale where water pools lazy in the lowlands, fed by springs that bubble like half-forgotten thoughts, the ground a treacherous quilt of hummocks and hidden sinkholes that test the surest foot. Spear-pierced warriors, those unlucky souls skewered in the heat of border clashes or beastly ambushes, don't mend with smoke alone, their punctures weep and wander, demanding an absorbent armor that drinks the deluge without drowning in it, and sphagnum moss, that unassuming emerald velvet, steps up as nature's quiet quartermaster. She navigates the dim with instinct's map, moccasins probing the squelch-soft earth, each step a soft suck and release that echoes the bog's own breath, wet and patient, alive with the chirp of hidden frogs and the distant plop of something elusive slipping deeper. The air here hangs heavier, laced with the mineral tang of standing water, and the subtle, musty sigh of decays. Gentle work, a scent that's equal parts promise and peril, like opening a long-shut attic to find treasures tangled in cobwebs. Sphagnum isn't your garden variety moss. It's the peatland's peony, carpeting the bog in cushions thick as a bear's rug. Its fronds fine and feathery, pale green to tawny gold, holding water like a sponge woven from the god's own secrets up to 20 times its weight, they say, though out here it's measured in lives saved, not lab scales. She kneels at the edge, skirts tucking into the mud's embrace, and plucks a handful with reverent fingers, the moss yielding soft as a sigh, its texture a luxurious drag against the skin, cool and pliant, threads interlacing like the finest lace from spider silk. Back in the longhouses, glow embers coax to a ruddy heartbeat for her return. The warrior lies propped on boughs, his spear wound a puckered portal in his thigh, the entry a neat betrayal fringed by the exit's ragged roar, blood and bog water mingling in a slow seep that defies the smoke's earlier siege. The apprentice hovers nearby, his own hasty cut a mere footnote now, eyes wide as he watches her work, the moss under the low light, teasing it apart with bone combs until it fluffs like fresh-pulled wool, airy and absorbent, ready to press into the puncture's depths. She rinses it first in a basin of boiled nettle water callback to those thorn trials in the meadow. The sting, now sanitized to steam, then packs it gentle but firm, the moss expanding on contact with the wound's warmth, drinking the excess like a parched traveller at an oasis. Its sphagnal acids a subtle scourge against the bacteria that lurk in spearshaft filth. Mainstream historical fact, the woodland metis and Cree communities along the subarctic fringes used sphagnum dressings as standard issue for puncture wounds during the fur trade era around the 1800s, as logged in Hudson's Bay Company ledgers, where it outabsorbed imported linens and kept infection at bay in the muck of trapline skirmishes. The press is poetry in motion, layered over with a broad oak leaf for breathability, bound with strips of softened sinew that whisper against the skin, the whole affair, a verdant vault that cradles the pierce without constriction. Sensory immersion pulls you in the moss-damp silk against fevered flesh, a cool counterpoint to the body's inner blaze, releasing a faint oceanic whiff as it works, like tide pools left to evaporate under sun. The warrior exhales slow, the tension easing from his frame like mist from a morning meadow. The seep staunch not by force but by this velvet's voracious thirst. Modern aside, Wed engineer synthetic versions for battlefield medkits, hyped as hydrogel too, but forget the moss magic. It's not just absorption, it's alive with ions that ionize the invaders, a bog-borne battery for the blood's defense. She adjusts the binding, fingers tracing the edges where moss meets muscle, murmuring a low tune that's half lullaby, half litany, invoking the water spirits who gift such green guardians to the grounded. Quirky tidbit fringes the bog's lore. Some hider tails from the coastal rains fringed the moss with mischief, claiming sphagnum wasn't born of earth, but bartered from salmon spirits, those slick swimmers who traded scales for softness, imbuing the fronds with a slippery luck that made spear wounds slide towards swift healing. Elders packing it with a pinch of fishbone dust to hook the recovery, a fringe flourish that turned dressings into underwater enchantments. She adds no such bone tonight, but the story lingers in her smile as the apprentice leans in, nose wrinkling at the moss' subtle brine. "Smells like the river's secrets," he says, voice a thread in the quiet. And she nods, fluffing another tuft for his cut's curious cousin, a shallow pierce from a thorn's sly stab. Better than your boots. After a ford, at least this one soaks up trouble, not just toes. First joke drifts easy, his chuckle a soft ripple that stirs the embers, lightening the longhouse's hush as she demonstrates the pack, letting him press the moss himself. It's give a tactile lesson in trust. Historians still argue whether sphagnum's rise as absorbent armor stemmed from opportunistic bog foraging during seasonal migrations, or deliberate cultivation in sacred wetlands. Did tribes shape the peatlands like living gardens, or did the moss simply assert itself in the wild's wet whims? The question bogs down like the very ground. Debated in dusty tomes, but alive here in the healer's hands, enriching the ritual without muddying the mend. She layers more for the warrior, the moss moulding to the puncture's contours like a custom cast. Its acidity, a gentle exfoliant that peels away the dead while cradling the quick. The air thickens with the blend moss-marshy murmur undercut by the hearth's woody warmth. The faint coppery fade of blood, now overpowered by green's quiet victory. From the doorway, the uncle ambles in, flask in hand, eyeing the verdant vault with a squint. "Moss for meat-eaters? Next, you'll wrap us in ferns." She glances up, binding secure, and quips back with sleepy sarcasm. "Ferns for fools. Uncle Moss for the wise who know when to soak it up and shut it down." Second jest lands like a leaf on still water, his guffaw booming brief before softening to a nod of approval. The apprentice stifling a snicker behind his hand. The steadfast need tending to, not just the spear's victims, but the sentinels who stand vigil, their lesser nicks from bramble patrols or axe slips weeping in sympathy. She parcels tufts into leaf packets, distributing with a word and a touch, the moss versatility shining. For a scout's grazed calf, it pads and purifies. For a child's thorn prick, it cushions without smother. Modern minds might marvel at the microscopy polytrichomes like tiny vacuums, sucking seepage while secreting slow-release salves. But here, it's holistic hush, the bog's gift grounding the body to the earth's own pulse. The third joke brews as the uncle tests his own minor mar, dabbing moss with exaggerated caution. "If it works half as well as your stories, it'll be dancing by dawn, though probably on one leg." Laughter circles low, a trio complete, weaving warmth into the night's weave as the longhouse settles, breath sinking to the bog's distant bubble. By the hour when stars wheel slow overhead, pinpricks in velvet black, the moss has woven its miracles. The warrior's pierce, padded to peace, Seep surrendered to sphagnum's swallow, his sleep a deep draught untroubled by twinges. The healer steps back, hands moss-flecked and satisfied, wiping them on her apron as she tucks the satchel's spare tufts away, dried fronds rustling like dry leaves in autumn's sigh. These velvet unveilings aren't fanfare. They're the forest's understated embrace. Absorbent armor pressed from peats, patient heart for the pierced and the persistent, turning punctures from perils to passages. The bog calls faint in the distance, its cushions ever ready. As she turns toward the vine-draped thickets where tangy tales ferment, bubbling vinegars poised to battle the bacteria and infected gashes with their bold bacterial bravado. Section 8. She turns toward the vine-draped thickets where tangy tales ferment, bubbling vinegars poised to battle the bacteria in infected gashes with their bold bacterial bravado, the bog's distant bubble fading behind her like a punctuation to the moss-quiet conquest. Night's velvet deepens to that ink-blue hush, stars pricking through the canopy like scattered embers from a careless god, and the air turns crisp with the promise of frost-kissed dawn, carrying the first faint zing of fermentation from the underbrush. A sour-sweet whisper, like apples left too long in the crisper drawer, plotting their own rebellion, infected gashes, those sly saboteurs, where a fang's filth or flint's flecks burrow deep, turning a clean cut to a crimson cauldron of pus and protest. They simmer with their own inner storm, demanding a tangy tide to turn the tide-fermented forest fruits, wild harvested and hushed into vinegars that fizz with vigor. Acidic assassins against the microbial marauders that feast in the flesh folds. The thickets beckon like old gossips, vines twisting over fallen logs in lazy arabesques, their leaves a rustle of silk in the breeze, heavy with clusters of crab apples and wild grapes that dangle like jewels pilfered from summer's hoard. She slips among them, the satchel quills now silent as sleeping porcupines brushing against bark. Rough as regret, her fingers questing for the overripe ones, those that yield with a soft give under thumb, skins splitting to release juices that drip sticky and sharp, staining the earth in splotches of rogue rosé. Crabapples first. Those tart green grenades of the woodland orchard, knobby and defiant, plucked from boughs bent low by their own weight, their scent a puckering prelude, citrusy snap undercut by a feral funk. Like lemonade laced with mischief, grapes follow, fox varieties from the river's edge, their skins dusky and thin, bursting with a wine-wild sweetness that clings to the tongue like a half-forgotten flirtation. These aren't for idle munching. They're the raw recruits for vinegar's vision, fruits ferried to fermentation, where bacteria and yeast dance a duet of destruction, birthing a brew that battles infection with the bravado of 1,000 tiny lances. Back in the longhouse's lee, under the slant of starlight filtering through the thatch like silver sieves, she sets her harvest in a clay crock, wide-mouthed and weathered, its belly scarred from seasons of such stirrings. The vessel, a vessel for visions both literal and lactic, a callback to the elderberry's juicy echo. She adds a handful of those bruised berries from the gourd's remnants, their purple pulp a deepening dye to the mix, while willow bark shavings whispers from the satchel's coil lend a bitter backbone. Water from the spring, clear as a held breath, pours into cover, and she seals it loose with a corncob plug, the air already humming with the first faint fizz, as wild yeasts hitch a ride from the air, invisible nomads turning sugar to sorcery. Days will pass in this slow simmer, 3 moons of warmth by the hearth's edge, where the crock sweats, beads like a fevered brow, the contents bubbling soft and insistent, vinegar's mother forming a filmy veil on the surface, that gelatinous guardian of the good germs. Mainstream historical fact, the Iroquois and Algonquin alliances brewed fruit vinegars for wound washes in the 1700s, as detailed in colonial botanist journals, like those of John Bartram, using them to flush infected gashes from trade route tussles. Their acetic acid, a precursor to modern antiseptics that kept pox and pus at bay in unsterile wilds. The tangy tales unfold in the wait. Stories stirred into the crock like spices in a stew. Tales of warriors who swigged the sharp stuff straight to vision quest the venom, eyes glazing with the burn as bacteria fled the blaze. She tends it daily, peering in with a tilt, the scent evolving from fruity promise to pungent punch, a vinegar vigor that bites the nose like a wasp with a grudge, effervescent and electric. When ready, it's strained through cheesecloth woven from milkweed floss soft as a sigh, tough as necessity yielding a liquid amber that gleams in the ladle, sharp and alive, bubbles tracing lazy paths to the rim like secrets surfacing. For the warrior's gash, now gnawed by infection's greedy gums despite moss and smoke siege, she dilutes it with spring water, a 1 to 3 whisper, then soaks a pad of clean lint from boiled flax, the cloth drinking deep till it drips with defiant tang. Pressed to the infected edge, peeled back gentle, the sore a swollen sigh of red and yellow, pus purling like unclean pearls, The vinegar hisses soft on contact, a sizzle like bacon on a cold pan, the acid assaulting the invaders with enzymatic elegance, breaking down their biofilms while flushing the filth in rivulets that run clear as confession. Sensory swell engulfs. The vinegar's vinegary zing assaults the air, sharp as shattered glass smoothed by sea, mingling with the sore's underlying rot. A brief, brutal bouquet that fades to the clean rinse of relief. The warriors wince, softening to a sigh, as the burn blooms inward, bacteria battling to retreat. Modern aside, we'd patent this as probiotic wound warrior. Spritz bottles in every ER, with probiotics on the label, and a celebrity endorsement from a gut health guru. But here it's homestead heresy, fermented from the forests, forgotten fruits, no shelf life, just a sip shiver, and a swab's salvation. The apprentice, his own cut curiously clean, watches wide-eyed, nose wrinkling as she rings the pad over a basin, droplets plinking like rain on a drum. Smells like summer's revenge, he mutters, and she chuckles low, the first joke bubbling up like the brew itself. Better than your socks after a sweat lodge. At least this one's out for blood, not just the blues. Laughter laps light, a wave that eases the longhouse's tension. The croc's fizz a faint underscore to the mirth. Quirky tidbit tangles in the vines. Fringe folklore from the Lenape. Whispers that these vinegars weren't mere medicines, but mediums for visions. Inhale the steam from a hot compress, and you'd see the bacteria as black-shelled beetles fleeing your flesh, or glimpse the fruit spirits dancing in the dregs, granting vigour not just to wounds but to weary hunters. Some elders swearing a swig before the dawn patrol sharpened sight to spot deer in the dusk. She applies a second soak, the pad reheated over embers till steam curls like question marks, draping it over the gash with a binding of softened grapevine, flexible and fragrant, twisting secure without a pinch. The infection's fire flickers under the assault, pus yielding to a cleaner weep, the skin's edges perking like plants after rain. Historians still argue whether these fermented ferments were accidental discoveries from fruit stores gone awry, or intentional incubations guided by observed bubbling in beaver ponds. Did the women of the Wampanoag cultivate yeast strains on purpose, or did the wild just whisper the recipe in the rot? The debate ferments like the crock itself, heady and hazy, much like wondering if your kombucha's kick is craft or cosmic coincidence. The vigour spreads, not just to the sore but to the circle. The uncle, flask forgotten, sniffs the air with a squint, then dips a finger for a taste, face puckering like a drawstring purse. Tastes like a dare from the deer gods, he grumbles, and she hands him the ladle with a wink. Dare accepted, swallow, and maybe your next tale won't curdle. Second, Jess slips tangy, his sputter turning to a grin as he passes it round, the group sampling in turns, the burn bonding them in shared shiver. Modern sarcasm simmers. Imagine TikTok tutorials for this vinegar vision vibes. Ferment your way to fungal freedom, with ASMR squishes and zero disclaimers. The third joke brews as the apprentice dabs his own minor mar, eyes watering. If it visions victory, why do I see stars? Earning a chorus of chuckles that chase the chill. The longhouse warming with the croc's communal call. By the croc's third turning, dawn's light now a soft intrusion, gilding the vines outside. In hesitant gold, the gash gleams less grievous. Infection's bravado broken by the vinegar's bold bubble, edges knitting under a final rinse that leaves the air humming clean. She bottles the remainder in gourds stoppered with wax, labeling with bark tags notched for potency. Crab for cuts, grape for gashes, a tangy treasury for the trials ahead. These visions aren't vaporware, they're the forest's fermented fire. Fruits turn to fighters that flush the foul with acidic aplomb, vigour bubbling from the bold heart of the wild. The thickets rustle farewell, their vines heavy with promise, as she shoulders the satchel once more. Drawn to the fungal fringes, where feathers and fungi fables flutter, puffballs poised to puff away the pus in poetic precision. Thought for 4 seconds. Section 9. She shoulders the satchel once more, drawn to the fungal fringes where feathers and fungi fables flutter, puffballs poised to puff away the pus in poetic precision, the vinegar's lingering zing fading into the night's crisp hush, like a story half told at the fire's edge. The forest's underbelly cools now, that shadowy seam where fallen logs lie like ancient tomes, their bark peeled back to reveal the quiet congress of mycelium threads, weaving white webs through the rot, a subterranean society thriving in the damp decay that daylight dares not disturb. Dawn's tentative fingers stretch longer this time, gilding the treetops in hesitant honey. But down here, in the fungal folds, time bends soft and slow, measured not in hours, but in the subtle shift of spore clouds drifting like ghosts on a breeze too lazy to lift. Pus, that creamy curse of the infected gash-stubborn survivor of spear and fang, bloating wounds with its milky mutiny, finds its poetic comeuppance in these fringes, where puffballs puff their powdery protests and feathers ferment with the finesse of a Fletcher's flight, turning foulness to fable in a flutter of forgotten finesse. She veers off the path, moccasins sinking into the leaf-litter duff that cushions the ground like a well-worn quilt, the air cooling to that earthy exhale of decomposition, mushroomy and moist, with an undernote of sweetness like bread rising in some hidden oven. The satchel bumps rhythmic against her side, quills stirring faint as a sigh. She scans the log-littered labyrinth. Old-growth oaks toppled by winter's whim, their trunks cradled in moss-emerald embrace, now host to the fungi's fanciful forms. Puffballs emerge first, those globular guardians lycopodon, round as a child's rattle, snow-white and seamless, perching on stumps like oversized pearls plucked from the peat. She cups one gently, the size of a fist, its skin taut and velvety under thumb, giving just a whisper when pressed, no spores released yet, no dusty detonation, just the promise of powder, pure as fresh-fallen flurries. Sliced open with a deerskin-wrapped flint, the interior gleams sterile white, a spongy matrix begging to be crumbled. Its spores an antifungal fog that modern labs would bottle as mycelial magic dust, but here it's harvested humble, sifted into a pouch of nettle weave, the air blooming with a faint, nutty whiff like popcorn at a midnight showing. Back at the longhouse's threshold, where the vinegar crock cools its final bubbles like a contented burp, the warrior's gash now a grudging guest, after the tang's triumph still harbours pockets of pus, yellow pearls winking wicked from the depths defying the drain. His apprentice, ever the echo, nurses a similar simmer in his thighs, shallow scrape, both men propped on reed pallets, faces slack with the weariness that follows fever's flight. She sprinkles the puffball powder first, a fine mist shaken from the pouch like confectioner's sugar on a forbidden tart, dusting the peeled-back dressing where the sore sulks. The spores settle soft, a poetic precision in their puff, absorbing the ooze on contact, their chitin walls a scaffold that sequesters the slime while releasing compounds that choke the culprits at the cellular core. Mainstream historical fact: the Seminole and Miccosukee of the Everglades incorporated puffball poultices in the 1800s, as recorded in U.S. Army surgeon reports during the Seminole Wars, using the dust to dry out pus from musket ball punctures in the swamp's steamy siege, turning battlefield bogs into unlikely birthing grounds for recovery. The fables flutter forth as she works, tales traded in the tribe's oral ledger like cards. In a game where every hand heals, puffballs, not mere mushrooms but messengers from the mushroom man, that liminal lord of the leaf mold who bartered his breath for the biped's burdens. She mixes the powder with a dollop of rendered raccoon, fat, slick and pale, scooped from a clay jar in the satchel's nook, its gamey warmth, a callback to the bear's own balm from roots long unearthed, forming a paste that spreads like creamed butter on warm bread, the texture gritty yet yielding, embedding into the gash grudge with a gentle grind. Sensory hush descends. The paste's cool slide against hot hurt. The puffball's subtle earthiness blooming under the fat's faint musk, mingling with the longhouse's low hum of hearth smoke and human repose. A nocturnal nectar that lulls even the fireflies outside into slower spirals. Modern aside, wed grind this into fungal fix-it ointment. Slather it on with spatulas and seals of approval. But forget the finesse. It's the spore's silent siege that scripts the story. Poetic in their puff without the puffery. Feathers join the fray now. Fomentations feathered from the forests. Flyers' eagle plumes for the high rites. But here, softer surrogates. Turkey tail brackets sliced thin from birch bark scars. Their fan of feathers fanned out in concentric circles, or actual down from molted grouse, plucked ethical from the underbrush like wind's leavings. She selects a grouse feather, barbs broad and downy, its quill hollow as a promise, and dips it in a brew of boiled bracket fungus. Tramete's versicolor, that turkey-tailed tapestry of browns and buffs, simmered in the ember's edge till the water tints tea gold, rich with polysaccharide whispers that bolster the blood's brigade. The feather ferries the foment, brushed along the gash's rim in strokes as light as a lover's trace. The liquid seeping warm and insidious. The feathers, veins a vehicle for vapours that vent the pus prison, drawing it forth in beads that purl and plop into a waiting leaf. Quirky tidbit. Fringe fables, from the tlingit of the northern coast's fringe. The feathers with fancy grouse plumes weren't just applicators but animators, believed to tickle the spirits from the sore, making pus flee in fits of ethereal laughter, some healers fluttering them like fans during chants to feather away the foul. A whimsical wind that turned treatments into ticklish tales. Historians still argue whether these fungal fables sprang from shamanic syncretism, blending bird lore with mushroom mysteries, in rituals that mirrored migration patterns, or pragmatic pairings born of what's handy in the harvest's hall, feathers and fungi flung together by the wild's own whimsy. The debate flutters unresolved, like a feather caught in updraft, enriching the enigma without grounding it, much like pondering if your feather duster's dance is dust downing or just delightful delusion. The warrior stirs under the brush, a low rumble escaping as the feather's tip teases the tender edge, pus yielding to the foment's flow, the gash gasping cleaner breaths. The apprentice mirrors the motion on his own mar, feather trembling in young hands, the bracket brews herbal, hush woody and warm, like cedar steeped in secrets coating his skin in a sheen that shines soft in the dawn's diffusing light. From the circle's fringe, the uncle lumbers closer, rubbing sleep from his eyes, sniffing the air with a theatrical wrinkle. Feathers for fighting pus? Next you'll prescribe lullabies. She pauses mid-stroke, feather poised like a quill mid-sentence, and quips back with gentle gleam. Lullabies for the lazy, uncle feathers for the fighters who need a tickle to tough it out. First joke lands light as the down itself, his harumph melting to a half grin, the longhouse lightening with the levity as she demonstrates the dip and dab, letting the boy take the lead. The fables deepen in the doing. The secondary poultice simmers on a hot stone puffball paste blended with sliced reishi, that antlered enigma of the hemlock hollows, its lacquered caps chipped to curls that unfurl in the heat, releasing a bitter earth elixir that echoes the elderberry's fever fight, but targets the pus-persistent pulse. Spread on a bed of feather-fringed like an old man's beard, trailing grey wisps from branch to bog, the poultice packs, the gash gulf, the feathers fomenting a ferment that ferries the fungus fire inward, poetic in their precision as pus puffs away in wisps of white surrender. The air layers lush, reishi's resinous rumble, feathers faint avian afterglow, the stone's subtle sizzle, a symphony soft enough for sleep, yet stirring the senses to savour the shift. Modern sarcasm simmers subtle. Imagine Etsy for this feathered fungi kit. Pus be gone with a side of stories, handmade with love and a liberal dash of lore. Who'd rate it 5 feathers? The circle swells with the scent, apprentices edging in like eager fledglings. The girl from the satchel's stitch, now a fungal fledgling herself, fanning a feather with wide-eyed wonder, her strokes sending spores skirling like snow in a shaker. "Does it dream the dreams away too?" she asks, voice a velvet thread. And the healer nods, powder dusting her lashes. "Dreams of the damp, yes, but keep fluttering. Or it'll dream of you instead." Second jest slips feathery, giggles gusting gentle as the group gathers closer, sharing the bracket brew in horn cups, the warmth weaving them tighter. The third tallies as the uncle tests a tuft on his own old ache, wincing theatrically. "If this puffs away my pains, I'll crow like a grouse at sunrise, though probably just wheeze." Laughter lifts light, a flutter of fables made flesh, the longhouse humming with the harmony of healing's hush. By the sun's slow climb to morning's midpoint, beams slanting golden through the vent, like arrows of approval, the gashes gleam, redeemed pus puffed to oblivion, edges easing into earnest knit under the poultices' poetic press. She peels back the feathers, now limp with their labour, rinsing them in spring water that runs clear as closure, tucking the remnants into the satchel for the next narrative nudge. These fringes aren't finale. They're the forest's fanciful flourish, fungal and feathered fables fluttering forth to finesse the foul with fluff and finesse, turning pus from plague to poem. The logs outside lie waiting, their mycelial mysteries ever multiplying. As the healer rises, gaze drifting to the twilight's tender threshold where timeless tonics fade into reflection, legacies lingering like leaves in the last light. The logs outside lie waiting, their mycelial mysteries ever multiplying. As the healer rises, gaze drifting to the twilight's tender threshold where timeless tonics fade into reflection, legacies lingering like leaves in the last light, the forest exhaling a final, feathery sigh that carries the day's secrets into the gathering dusk. The sun dips low now, a crimson orb bleeding into the horizon's hem, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the clearing, turning the longhouse's thatch to burnished gold and the warrior's mended form to a silhouette of quiet triumph. His gash, once a raw roar of fang and flint, now whispers only in the faint pull of fresh scab, edges knit by the woodlands, patient weave bark's resilience, berries bold, smoke's subtle shield, moss merciful moor, vinegar's vigorous vent, and the fungal flutter that fanned away the final foulness. The apprentice mirrors him, his hasty hurt a healed footnote, flexing fingers that forget the fray. While the circle thins to embers and echoes, voices softening to murmurs as night claims the narrative, leaving space for the healer's hush. A backward glance not at wounds won, but at wonders whispered through the warp and weft of generations, enduring legacies that root deep as the mycelium's maze, branching wide as the canopy's quiet claim. She settles then on a stump worn smooth by countless such closings, the wood's grain a braille of seasons spent, her satchel that quill-kissed chronicle of cures draped across her lap like a favoured shawl, its contents spent but stirring still with the ghosts of green. The air cools to velvet, scented with the last lazy bloom of wild rose, and the underlying humus hush of earth turning in on itself. Crickets tuning up their twilight chorus in lazy strums that lull the ear like waves on a distant shore. These timeless tonics aren't relics rusting in some forgotten drawer, their rivers running underground, surfacing in the stories swapped by firelight. In the baskets passed from grandmother's gnarled hands to granddaughter's eager grasp, each sprig and salve a syllable in the saga of survival. Picture it. Moons from now, under a sky stitched with the same indifferent stars, another healer, perhaps the foxglove girl, grown tall as the thickets she once tumbled through, will kneel by a similar seep, her pouch plump with pine pitch pilfered from the same scarred pine, willow whispers wound tight as her own resolve. The forest doesn't forget. It folds the knowledge into its folds, leaves rustling with the residue of remedies that outlast the longhouses they sheltered, legacies that laugh at the linear tick of time, looping eternal like the spirals etched in her clay bowls. Modern minds, those bustling brains behind screens and sterile labs, marvel at these woodland wonders with a mix of awe and appropriation. Tinctures bottled in blue glass on apothecary shelves, elderberry gummies gobbled for immune boosts without a nod to the thickets that birthed them, sphagnum extracts in fancy wound gels that forget the bog's boggy baptism. We chase the chemical keys, salicyl's sway, acetic acid's acidulous assault, kitten's clever chokehold dissecting the dance into data points, while the healer's harmony hums on, unpassed and profound. Sensory fade, the stumps bark rough under her palms, warmed by day's dregs, the air's chill nipping at her neck like a fox's fleeting brush, carrying the faint, fermented farewell of vinegar vats, and the powdery puff of spent spores, a bouquet boxed in memory's mist. Gentle sarcasm slips in, oh how we'd rebrand the satchel as a portable plant pharmacy, app-enabled with AR overlays for authentic foraging, complete with a subscription for spirit-approved sage bundles. Who'd buy the upgrade for ancestral ASMR? But legacies linger longer than labels, etched in the earth's own ledger, the way a warrior's stride steadies on yarrow-knitted legs, carrying him to hunts that feed the future. The soft suck of moss saving a child from a thorn's tear, ensuring the songs don't skip a verse. Mainstream historical fact: by the 1900s, native healers like the Cherokee's Mooney documented medicine women integrated these tonics into resistance against boarding school epidemics, their berry brews and smoke shields quietly sustaining communities. Through the white man's civilizing coughs, a covert curriculum in resilience that federal records barely bothered to footnote. She traces a finger along the satchel's seam, sinew stretched taut by time's tug, and smiles at the circles, remnants the uncle dozing against a post. Flask finally forsaken, his snores a ragged rhythm that syncs with the cricket's cant. The girl perched nearby, eyes heavy-lidded but hungry, braiding sweetgrass into a ring that smells of vanilla vows. Tell me the end, the child murmurs, voice a threadbare whisper, and the healer leans close, breath warm as willow tea. There is no end, little one, just the echo that calls the next. To listen. Quirky tidbit twinkles in the twilight. Fringes from the Hopi Kachina cults whisper that these tonics weren't taught by trial alone, but tuned by thunderbirds. Those storm-winged sages who'd drop dream dews on sleeping healers, infusing vinegars with visions and puffballs with prophetic puffs. Some elders claiming a particularly potent batch once made a warrior see the bear's next berry patch, turning a gash scrudge into a guide for the good. Historians still argue whether these enduring echoes were preserved through oral oaths, sacred swears sworn on starlit stones, or adapted adroitly to invaders' ills, blending bark with borrowed botanicals to bridge the breach of worlds colliding. The debate drifts like dusk's own dust, unanswered and alluring, much like musing if your herbal tea's tranquility is tradition, or just a tidy trick of the tongue. She shares a sprig of sage with the girl, crushing it slow between them, the sharp snap releasing a scent that stings the eyes to softness, a bridge from the day's doings to the night's nestle. The warrior stirs then, propping on an elbow, his gaze meeting hers across the fires, fading, freckles, embers now mere murmurs, painting their faces in flickers of farewell. The woods, they speak still? He asks, voice gravel ground by the grind of healing, and she nods. The satchel's quills rattling a soft affirmation, louder in the quiet. Brother, listen, and they'll lace your scars with stories for the sons yet unborn. Modern aside, we'd podcast this as Forest Folklore Files, episodes on Moss Magic Mondays with guest shamans, and sponsored by synthetic salves. But here it's unscripted scripture, passed palm to palm without the polish. Lauter's last light lifts as the uncle snorts awake, rubbing his jaw. If the woods speak, they should have warned me about that last hunt. Saved me the limp and the legend. First joke fades gentle, the group rumbling response. The girls giggle, a silver thread in the tapestry. She adds a feather to the fire's edge, grouse down from the fungal fray. Curling slow to ash, and the apprentice chimes in, flexing his mended mitt. Or whispered, Where the fish were hiding, my hook still hungry. Second jest joins the jest, chuckles chasing the chill, while the third tallies in her own sleepy quip. Hungry hooks and limping legends blame the berries. They brew visions, not victories every time. As the stars thicken overhead, a spill of silver salt across the void, the healer gathers the remnants, a twist of yarrow for the girl's pouch, a vial of lingering vinegar for the warrior's kit, each token a tether to the tonic's timeless thread. These woodland wonders, whispered through generations like wind through the wildwood, don't demand dominion. They offer alliance, a quiet covenant, where human hurt meets humus hug, scars becoming scrolls of the shared. Modern marvels might mimic the molecules, but the magic's in the murmur, the way the forest folds you in, not as conqueror but kin, legacies layering like leaves in autumn's hush, enduring as the roots that refuse to release. The circle closes soft, voices veiling to velvet, the embers glow gilding the goodbyes, and in that twilight threshold, the healer's gaze lifts to the canopy's cradle, where branches bow benevolent, ready to whisper anew when the next wound calls. And now, as the embers settle into a soft sighing glow, like the last breath of a story well spun, let the weight of the day dissolve into the downy dark of your own quiet corner. Feel the forest's farewell wrap around you, gentle as moss under moon, its secrets seeping slow into the soil of your dreams, where wounds weave whole not in haste but in the hush of time's tender touch. No rush remains, no ragged edge to mend these timeless tonics, passed like fireflies from hand to heart across the hush of hills and hollows. Remind us that healing hums always, a hidden river beneath the rush of the world, carrying us softly toward shores of simple peace. Breathe deep this borrowed balm. Let the whispers of willow and sage settle like snow on your shoulders, easing every ache into acceptance, every scar into a starlit sign of strength endured. The wildwood watches over, benevolent and boundless, its leaves a lullaby that lingers long after the light has left, cradling you close in the cadence of creation's calm. Rest now, dear wanderer, in the arms of what was woven wild and wise. May your night unfurl like fern fronds at first light, fresh and full of forgotten grace. Sweet dreams await, just a sigh away.